Welcome to Dave's Faves, a new series where I'll be giving my honest thoughts on video games that I think are absolutely amazing, despite their lack of whoopers. And today, we're going to be reviewing one of my most played games on Steam. I'm talking Terraria, boys. Terraria is a 2D action-adventure sandbox RPG developed by Relogic for PC, and is the first game I ever bought on Steam. It's a Minecraft-inspired game in that it consists of blocks, and sand is susceptible to gravity unlike everything else that exists in cubic form. So yeah, it's just a Minecraft clone. Except that it's better than Minecraft. In all honesty, however, the game isn't all that much like Minecraft by the fact that you have to mine and craft stuff. It's far more action-packed and combat-oriented with some RPG elements thrown in. And there's also one less dimension, I guess. Although it has RPG elements, Terraria doesn't really follow a storyline as much as it does a sequence of progression of gear and equipment. And it has a great combat system and multiple enemies and dungeons to conquer. It's a game of freedom, a blank canvas of a world for you to shape as your own. There are so many different aspects of this game that Relogic have done right, which is why I've chosen this game to be the inaugural game to be reviewed as part of this series. I've put many an hour into Terraria and have enjoyed every single one of them. And here's why. Terraria is one of those games where every time I come back to it, I will start over again. And it's not because I feel like I have to, it's because I want to. Every aspect of this game, from the very humble beginnings to the absurdly complicated endgame stuff, is a whole heap of fun. The progression you go through from being some asshole with a tiny sword who can't even double jump to being some kind of godly mecha wizard who can fly and shoot laser beams out of his ass is one of the most satisfying things about this game. Initially, you might have to build a platform or something to navigate the landscape or a cavern, but after a while you'll have a grappling hook, a double jump, rocket boots, or any of the other of the plethora of accessories and tools you'll come across, and zipping across the landscape becomes much more enjoyable. The combat progression is also super satisfying. You'll go from fighting slimes to shooting through the sky fighting giant mechanical beasts that threaten the stability of the very world you live in. The gameplay is mostly centered around exploring, digging, and fighting enemies, and is further embellished by the settlement building aspect as well. Obviously, this game has a real Minecraft-y vibe about it because the game was most certainly directly inspired by it, and such building and mining can take up a large amount of the time that you spend in this game, particularly early game. Settlement building isn't just for show, however. You build houses for NPCs to move into, which they will after certain requirements are met and there is a spare room for them to live in. Each NPC will sell unique stuff and you need some of them to progress further into the game. The mining aspect can be a little grindy at times and is probably less enjoyable than the boss fights and dungeoneering, but the underground generally consists of multiple chains of caverns and whatnot, so you're spending most of your time spelunking, exploring, and fighting enemies. So digging for materials is still engaging. The underground is also littered with treasure, mini biomes, mini structures and whatever that also add to the fun of exploring. Not only is there the landscape above ground to map out, but also the endless caverns underground. Throughout the world there are heaps of different enemies to fight, some different variants of one another and some unique, which help to keep you engaged on your travels or while you're spelunking in a dark cavern. There's a bunch of unique bosses to fight, a few pre-hard mode bosses and a bunch of post-hard mode ones too. These boss fights become even more alive and unique in expert mode, where some of them get a little ridiculous. Relogic have done a number of great updates to this game over the years, and while rather infrequent, they tend to bring a heap of new content and late game stuff to give you another reason to dive back on in. I remember back in the day when I'd cleared the dungeon and had full molten armor and I was a little disappointed because I'd done it all, you know? There wasn't much else to do. Then, quite soon after, bam, hard mode update. Completely renovating the world and experience after you defeat the Wall of Flesh boss. And since then, I haven't even beaten the whole game. There's just so much content, so much to do, it's fantastic. And then when I thought that was enough, Relogic hit you with the expert mode, reinvigorating the entire game again completely, turning it quite literally into the Dark Souls of 2D sandbox games. Expert mode is simply just the way this game is meant to be played. The exclusive loot is tantalizing and the challenge makes the game all that more exhilarating. Even if you haven't played this game before, if you ever do buy it, I would recommend just jumping straight into expert mode. Come on, don't be shy. Just do it. I'm not sponsored by Nike. There's so much content that I just don't feel compelled to play this game with mods, because I feel like there's already so much to do. When you don't feel the need to install mods in a sandbox game, that's evidence that the developers have certainly done something right. Multiplayer in Terraria is great, and it can be done right through Steam for super easy setup and access. Exploring and fighting bosses with your friends is always tons of fun, although it can be frustrating when some asshole takes all the loot. Terraria lets you create your little character and then lets you create a world for that character to play in, with presets being the size of the world, small, medium or large, and whether or not the world is normal or expert mode. Obviously only one of those choices is valid. The size of the world will, as you'd expect, determine how big the world is. Meaning smaller worlds will mean you can generally explore and progress quicker, but there will be less loot and stuff to explore overall. Obviously, the large option is the opposite, and the medium option is a good middle ground. Worlds will also have slightly different random variances in the kinds of ores that are available, being the 4 basic pre-hard mode metal ores and the 3 post-hard mode metal ores. These will either be the base ones or the slightly better versions. This can leave you feeling a little cheated if you just get all of the slightly worse base ores, but it also gives each world just that little bit of variance and flavour. Worlds will also spawn either one of 2 evil biomes, the Corruption or the Crimson. Evil purple and red biomes respectively. A lot of the gameplay is centered around stopping the spread of the evil biome or cleansing it completely, which is amplified in hard mode when these biomes are spread through just about everything and will be much harder to stop. Hard mode will also spawn an opposite biome, the Hallow, a holy biome of sorts, which will also spread over the world just as easily, and the player can choose to try and side with one of the spreading biomes or just remove them completely. The Corruption was the original evil biome and the Crimson biome was added later as a variant, and the Crimson generally has better equipment and such that you can get from it. Although, the Worm Scarf, which is a Corruption exclusive expert mode item, is probably one of the best accessories in the game. So I still like Corruption better. Your characters aren't tied to worlds either, so you can bring your character across multiple worlds or to your friend's world if you want to play multiplayer with your progressed character. The combat is intuitive and easy to get a hold of, but some of the advanced stuff, particularly what needs to be done to survive in expert mode, is a little more difficult to master. Melee enemies often just try to run, jump or fly into you to attack, but there are plenty of other classes of enemies, like mages, archers and burrowing worms, which all have their separate AIs and patterns. The RPG factor of the game comes into play with the loot system, which means that certain enemies will have certain drops, some guaranteed, some rare, and most enemies will almost always drop money. There isn't any leveling system, and your health and mana are upgraded by finding heart crystals underground and collecting fallen stars respectively. The amount of craftable and lootable weapons and armor is massive, and the game gives you a bunch of different classes of weapons to slaughter your enemies with. Swords, bows, thrown weapons, explosives, guns, magic weapons, all the good stuff. The movement of your character is just so smooth and tight, which embellishes the boss fights and even just general gameplay so well. Contrasting with a game like Starbound, also a 2D action-adventure sandbox, which has very stiff movement that is difficult to control, Terraria's movement is precise, yet your character will glide across the screen with ease. I think this is also due to the fact that your character in Terraria is much smaller compared to what you can see on the screen, which is definitely an advantage for movement and exploration in general. Using tools like grapple hooks and rocket boots to navigate is very satisfying, which I think is down to how well Relogic have nailed the character physics. Fall damage is also very fair and is often only an issue if you're careless. As I mentioned earlier, the game doesn't really have a specific storyline to follow, but more of a progression of gear and equipment as you defeat new bosses and dig further underground, which is very good for a sandbox game. Again, unlike Starbound, Terraria doesn't try to shove some dumbass story down your throat. It sets you off on a blank canvas with some loose lore that you can shape and bend to your will. I'm just using this as an excuse to bully Starbound. You learn about the world of Terraria through exploration and interacting with NPCs and such. It's got a distinct style that doesn't take itself too seriously, which is charming and fantastical. I think that it's very important for a sandbox game to feel like a sandbox, and not like an RPG with sandbox elements. And Terraria does the former. It's a sandbox game with RPG-like elements that just blends together so well. The visuals of Terraria might not be the best thing you've ever seen, but the sprite work for everything, the blocks, the parallaxing backgrounds, the enemies, the NPCs, it's all done very well. The game is from 2011, before the oversaturation of pixel graphics in every single indie title ever era, from around just after Minecraft got popular, but before it got too popular. Visually, the game is incredibly solid. Each of the different environments and biomes has its own flavour, and the look of the game has evolved throughout its development. The generated environments are often pretty and interesting, as are the pre-generated dungeons and structures, which is partially what encourages you to go and explore them. The graphics aren't demanding whatsoever, so you don't need a beast to run this game. Though you might come across a few frame rate drops and whatever if you're playing with some smoother lighting and that sort of thing. Terraria also gives you a great deal of different materials to build with as well, meaning that you can really unleash your creativity and create some amazing stuff. The soundtrack is just so diverse and refreshing. Sometimes you're chilling out too. And then sometimes it's all... Either way, it's retro and funky and exciting. This is without a doubt one of the best soundtracks on a PC game. Over time, I have clocked many hours into this game, and I don't think that I regret a single one of them. Terraria is a fresh and enjoyable experience every time you start anew with so much content to get through. So much that you probably won't even get all the way through it. The gameplay, the combat, the enemies, the visuals, the soundtrack, the everything just blends together so well into one big ass smoothie of pure enjoyment. The only real complaints I have about this game is that it can sometimes be a little bit of a grind, and that Relogic didn't put any whoopers in this game. But I can excuse that atrocity for now, and hope that they will be implementing them in a future update. I cannot recommend this game highly enough to anyone with the Steam account and the little amount of money that you need to drop on this game. Whether or not you have people to play with doesn't matter. This game is just as fun single player as it is multiplayer, and you can always have friends hot join to your world if you ever get really lonely in your pixel paradise. And even if you're not a PC gamer and you'd rather play this on console, then it's available on Xbox and PlayStation. Although the PC version generally has more updated content. So thanks for watching the very first episode of Dave's Faves, my dudes. Hope you enjoyed this video. I decided to finally start this series after hitting 1,000 subscribers, and I'll be releasing more episodes when I hit some higher sub targets. So if you want to see more of this content, if you haven't already, be sure to smash that motherfucking subscribe button. And I reckon if we hit 1,500 subs, I might give you another insight into the incredibly boring opinions of Dave Davidson.